Marcus laughed when the journalist praised his genius technique. That's just a little finishing process I developed," he said, waving his champagne flute. The journalist from Artisan Today was hanging on his every word, her eyes wide. We were standing in the middle of the new flagship showroom for Vance Atelier, a 6,000-square-foot monument to my work. All gleaming surfaces and dramatic lighting. I stood 20 feet away, by the catering table, wearing the black polo shirt and apron of the hired help. I was holding a silver tray, collecting empty glasses. I expected this. I knew he would take the credit. We had discussed it. I was to remain in the background. I was to be invisible. But the journalist wasn't done. She pointed directly at me. "And is this part of your team? She looks like she has an artist's hands." Marcus turned. His smile was perfect. Curated. A masterpiece of false pity. He looked at me, then back at the journalist. That's my cousin. Eleanor. She's a wonderful help. Very good at mixing the glue. We keep her on. Of course. Family charity." He chuckled. A low, smooth sound that made the investors nearby smile. "She's not really suited for the public-facing side of the business, as you can see, but she's very diligent in the workshop." I looked down at my hands, the hands the journalist had noticed. He called me the glue mixer. These hands were scarred. The knuckles on my right hand were permanently swollen from gripping a router. 2 fingers on my left hand were stiff. The nerves damaged from repetitive strain. The skin was rough, cracked, and stained. Even after an hour of scrubbing, I had chemical burns on my forearms from the proprietary resin I developed. The resin the journalist was calling genius. I lost feeling in my left thumb for 6 months while I was perfecting that finishing process. I looked at his hands. They were holding the champagne flute. They were smooth, manicured, soft. His hands had never held a sanding tool. They had never been burned by chemical solvents. They had never felt the agonizing ache of polishing the same surface for 12 hours straight. His hands held champagne flutes, signed invoices for my materials, and shook the hands of investors. I stayed perfectly calm. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just nodded politely at the journalist, gathered the last of the empty glasses, and walked toward the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the floor I had installed. He thought I was defeated. He thought I was weak. He didn't realize that in that moment, he hadn't just humiliated me. He had released me. He called me his assistant. That was the word he used for the press release. Marcus Vance, founder and visionary, supported by his dedicated assistant, Eleanor Vance. I wasn't the assistant. I was the artisan. I was the designer. I was the engineer. I was the entire factory. Every single piece in this glittering showroom that bore his name, every table, every chair, every sculpture came from my hands. I built the workbench we started on. I sourced the rare wood. I spent 3 years developing the lamination technique that made our furniture lightweight but stronger than steel. I was the one who woke up at 4 a.m, terrified, with the solution to a joinery problem that had plagued me for weeks. "Eleanor, you're the talent," he'd always said, back in the greasy garage we'd rented. "But I'm the brand. No one buys $1 million table from Eleanor Vance. It sounds dowdy. It sounds small." He had insisted on dropping my name from the brand entirely, using only his middle name, Vance Atelier. He said it was cleaner. He said it was stronger. He promised me 50-50. "Partners," he'd said, his hand on my shoulder. 50-50. You make it. I sell it. We'll be rich. I promise. Now, he was rich. I saw the lease agreement for this showroom. $50,000 a month. I saw his new car parked outside in the valet spot, a silver Aston Martin that gleamed under the streetlights. I saw his $1,000 suit, the one he'd bought for this party. I was wearing a $6 an hour catering uniform. He told me the business was still tight, that we had to reinvest every penny. He said my salary, which barely covered my rent, and the specialized chemical respirators I had to buy myself, was all the company could afford right now. Patience. Elle, he'd say, patting my hand. It'll pay off. For us. He didn't just lie to the journalist. He had built an entire empire on the foundation of that lie. And I had stood by and let him. I had mixed the glue. Family charity. He'd used those words. He'd said them with a straight face. Our grandfather, the man who taught me woodworking, left us each $30,000. It wasn't much, but it was everything to us. I used every cent of mine to buy the first specialized heat press and the industrial ventilation system for the garage. My $30,000 was the seed money for Vance Atelier. Without it, we would have never made our first sale. He told me he'd matched my investment. He'd shown me a bank statement, waving it in my face with a proud grin. See, $30K from me. $30K from you. We're in this together. 50-50. All in. I found out a year later, by accident, what he'd really done. He'd taken my $30,000, deposited it into our new joint business account, waited for it to clear, and then shown me the statement. The next day, he'd withdrawn $30,000, my $30,000, and used it as the down payment on his first luxury condo. He had never put in a single cent of his own money. He had started our partnership by stealing from me. My inheritance, my grandfather's last gift, paid for his first piece of real estate. My salary was him paying me back pennies on my own dollar. And now, in public, in front of the entire world, he was calling me the charity case. The rage was cold, not hot. It was heavy and sharp. It was clarifying. He wasn't just arrogant. He wasn't just a user. He was deliberately, methodically, and profoundly cruel. He had made me wear the uniform. That, more than anything, showed the depth of his contempt. I hadn't wanted to come tonight. The launch party was his triumph. I was exhausted. I had just finished the centerpiece, the monolith table, at 3 a.m. the night before. My back was locked in a spasm from lifting the final resin coat. I had spent 72 hours straight, with no sleep, finishing that one piece because Marcus had promised the Artisan Today journalist it would be here. I had literally collapsed on the workshop floor when it was done. Eleanor, I need you here. He'd insisted on the phone, his voice slick with false sincerity. It's the launch. Elle, all hands on deck. The investors want to meet the whole team. It won't be the same without you. He made it sound like I was being included. He made it sound like I mattered. Then, when I arrived, still aching, he pulled me aside before I could even step into the showroom. He handed me the black shirt and the apron. The catering staff is short-handed, he'd whispered, his eyes flashing with irritation. Not apology. Just blend in. Help out. Don't make it weird. We can't look disorganized. It's all about image. He didn't want me to blend in. He wanted me to be invisible. He wanted to ensure that if the journalist did see me, I would be clearly marked as the help. It wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. He was actively hiding me while I stood in the same room as the work I had bled for. He was mingling, laughing, accepting praise for the bold new direction of his designs. The designs I had sketched in a notebook I kept by my bed. He had stolen my hands, my time, my money, and now he was stealing my face. I looked at my reflection in the polished surface of the table I had built. I saw the black uniform. I saw the tired eyes. I saw the resignation. And then, I saw the flicker of a decision. The journalist was now touching the centerpiece. The monolith table. The way the light refracts through the resin. It's like the wood is lit from within. It's truly revolutionary. Mr. Vance. Revolutionary. It took me 18 months to create that effect. 18 months of failed experiments in my tiny place. Unheated workshop. It cost me my relationship. Because I was in that workshop every night. Every weekend. Covered in toxic dust. I breathed so many fumes. I developed chronic bronchitis. A cough I still couldn't shake. I have shelves filled with hundreds of failed chemical formulations. Solid blocks of opaque, ugly resin. The genius wasn't a flash of inspiration. It was my patience. The genius was my suffering. When I finally perfected it, when I brought him the first successful sample, he looked at it, shrugged, and said, "It's nice, a bit niche. Though, are we sure clients will even pay for this?" He downplayed it. He made me feel small. He made me feel like I was the one obsessed with a worthless detail. He gaslit me into thinking my breakthrough, the breakthrough that had cost me my health, was a minor curiosity. And now, he was basing his entire brand on it. The invitations, the press release, the speech he was about to give it was all about his revolutionary, light-refracting resin. He had waited. He had waited until my breakthrough was proven, until the critics were raving. And then he'd stepped into the spotlight, adjusted his cuffs, and claimed it as his own invention. He hadn't just stolen my work. He had stolen my mind. He was walking to the podium. He tapped the microphone, and the room fell silent. The trap was set, but not for me. For him. Behind him. On the wall. In 3-foot-high, backlit chrome letters. It read, "Vance Atelier. My name is Vance." 2. We were cousins. But he had made Vance his. I was just Eleanor. The dowdy, quiet, glue-mixing Eleanor. I remembered our grandfather, the one who left us the money. He was a master woodworker. He taught me. He was the one who put a chisel in my hand when I was 10 years old. He taught me to respect the grain, to have patience, to let the material speak. He saw the artist in me, the quiet, focused creator. Marcus hated going to grandfather's workshop. He said it smelled like sawdust and failure. He'd told me, "Eleanor, that old world stuff is dead. It's all about branding, image, story. The story is what sells." He had crafted a beautiful story, a story about a young visionary, Marcus Vance, who had resurrected his grandfather's forgotten craft. He was using my connection to our grandfather as his marketing angle. He was using my memories as his brand identity. He was erasing me and our grandfather simultaneously. He was taking the purity of the craft I'd inherited and twisting it into a hollow, $1,000,000 lie. The investors applauded as he took the stage, believing the lie. They were investing in a ghost who was currently clearing their champagne glasses. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice booming, rich with false humility. This has been a long journey of artistic discovery, a journey I started alone. I slipped out the side door into the service hallway. I didn't need to hear the rest of his speech. I had written it for him last week. I walked out of the glittering showroom and into the cool night air. I was still wearing the catering apron. I didn't take a cab. I took the bus. The ride was 45 minutes. Back to my tiny, one-bedroom apartment, above a laundromat. The apartment, he told me, was all I could afford on my assistant's salary, even as he was signing the lease on the $50,000 showroom. The showroom was in the richest part of the city. My apartment was in the industrial sector. I could smell the solvents on my clothes from the workshop. A sharp, chemical tang hidden beneath the smell of expensive champagne from the party. He had always framed my poverty as a shared sacrifice. We have to be smart. Eleanor, every dollar goes back into the brand. You understand? It's for us. He used that word constantly. Our success, our brand, our future. But when it came time to spend the money, it was his car, his condo, his suits, his party. When it came time to do the work, it was my hands, my lungs, my time, my inheritance. He was back there, under the spotlights, drinking $100 a bottle champagne, accepting praise for my hands, my mind, and my grandfather's legacy. I was on a rattling bus, my knuckles aching, my lungs tight, my bank account hovering at near zero. The contrast was so stark, so grotesquely clear. that it wasn't even painful anymore. It wasn't despair. It was just fuel. He thought the humiliation was the end. He thought he had finally, totally, subjugated me. He thought I was the quiet, weak, dowdy cousin who would just take it, because I was family. He forgot one thing. I wasn't just the artist. I was the architect. I built his entire world. And I knew exactly where all the load-bearing walls were. I got back to my apartment after midnight. The party was still going. I could still smell the expensive champagne on my cheap catering apron. I unlocked the 3 deadbolts on my metal door and stepped inside. The air hummed with the vibration of the laundromat below, and the sharp, acidic tang of curing resin from my workshop hung in the air. This was my live workspace. A concrete floor, a single hot plate, a mattress in the corner, and the chemical ventilation hood I'd built myself. This was the authenticity he'd bragged about in a press interview. Our artisan prefers a raw, industrial space. It's part of her process. He had framed my poverty, a poverty he enforced, as an aesthetic choice. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my back screaming in protest. He told me the company was still tight, that my assistant's salary of $28,000 a year was all we could afford. He said every penny was being reinvested into the brand. I had believed him. I ate instant noodles. I bought my clothes at thrift stores. I hadn't seen a dentist in 3 years. I had sacrificed my comfort, my health, and my dignity, believing I was a partner in a shared struggle. His share of the struggle was a $3,000 a month penthouse. His share was the new Aston Martin. His share was the $50,000 a month showroom I had just left. I wasn't his partner. I was his primary resource to be exploited. He wasn't reinvesting in the brand. He was liquidating me to fund his lifestyle. I thought about his words on the stage tonight. The words I had written for him. This all started from a shared dream. A family legacy. Family. He'd called me family charity in front of the investors. Our grandfather, the man who taught me to use a lathe, left us each $30,000. It was my entire inheritance. It was the last piece of my grandfather I had. Marcus came to me with his brilliant idea. Let's build an empire. We'll be partners. 50-50. All in. We'll pool our inheritance. We'll start Vance Atelier. I was the one who went to the bank. I deposited my $30,000 check into the new business account. He'd stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, smiling. This is it. Day 1 of our new life. He told me he'd deposited his check that afternoon. He even showed me the online statement a few days later, his finger tapping the screen. See, $60,000. We're in business. I had felt such pride, such hope. We were equals. I was so busy. I was sourcing the tools. I was building the workbenches. I was developing the first prototypes. I worked 16 hours a day in that freezing garage. I didn't look at the bank account again for 6 months. When I finally did, I saw the truth. I saw my $30,000 deposit, and then, 2 days later, I saw a $30,000 withdrawal. He had never deposited his check. He had waited for my money to clear, then withdrawn it, and used it as the down payment on his first luxury condo. He had started our 50-50 partnership by stealing my entire inheritance. When I confronted him, my hands shaking, holding the bank statement, he had laughed. He'd put his arm around me. It's just accounting. It's called leveraging assets. I'm making our money work for us. That condo, it's a company asset. It's for meetings. It's for our image. It wasn't a company asset. It was in his name. He was living in it. He had gaslit me, using words I didn't understand, to cover a simple, brutal theft. He had stolen my grandfather's legacy and was sleeping in it. And I, like an idiot, had let him. I was too scared to lose the dream. I looked down at my hands. The journalist was right. They were an artist's hands. They were ruined. In 2021, we got our first massive order. 20 tables for a new boutique hotel. It was the order that put us on the map. Marcus had negotiated the deal. He'd promised a delivery date that was physically impossible. I worked for 19 days straight. 18 hours a day. I didn't sleep. I ate protein bars standing at the bench. On the 14th day, my hand cramped shut from gripping the router. The tool slipped and tore across the knuckles of my right hand. I called Marcus, crying, blood pouring down my arm, terrified I'd ruined the $10,000 piece of wood. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't tell me to go to the hospital. His voice was cold, tight with annoyance. Eleanor, you cannot be this clumsy right now. We don't have time for this. We're on a deadline. Wrap it up. Use superglue to close the cuts if you have to. Just finish the order. Superglue. He told me to use superglue on a wound that needed stitches. I wrapped my hand in duct tape and paper towels. I finished the order. The knuckles on that hand never healed right. They are permanently swollen. A daily, aching reminder. While I was bleeding on the concrete floor of our garage, he was in Milan scouting trends. He posted a photo on Instagram of himself drinking an espresso at a sidewalk cafe, wearing a $5,000 suit. The caption read, "Inspiration is everywhere. The hustle never stops." My blood had paid for his suit. My scars had paid for his inspiration. And tonight, he had held up his soft, smooth, manicured hands and taken credit for my pain. Then there was the resin, the genius technique the journalist had been praising. It took me 18 months to invent that. 18 months of failures. My process was me, alone in this workshop, mixing volatile chemicals I'd bought from black market industrial suppliers. I had shelves filled with hundreds of failed, ugly, opaque blocks of resin. I breathed so many fumes. I developed a chronic cough that still woke me up at night. I had given myself permanent lung damage. I had to build a pressurized heat chamber in my apartment. A dangerous, makeshift contraption that nearly exploded twice. When I finally had the breakthrough, when I finally created that light from within effect, I was so excited, I texted him a video. His reply, 2 hours later, was great. Now can you make it 10% cheaper? The margins on this geniuses are too thin. He had belittled my breakthrough. He had made my triumph, a triumph that had cost me my health, into a line item on a spreadsheet. Then, 6 months later, I overheard him talking to an investor. It came to me in a dream. He was saying, his voice full of wonder, I saw wood that was alive. I saw it trapping light. I took the idea to my artisan, and I pushed her. I really pushed her. Until she finally figured out the science. It's that vision that sets us apart. He hadn't just stolen my work. He had stolen my mind. And he had made sure I had no one to tell. That was the most brilliant, most insidious part of his plan. When we started, I had friends. I was even dating a kind man. A university professor who respected my work. Marcus had systematically, surgically, cut them out of my life. He would manufacture deadlines. You can't go out tonight. The client just changed the specs. I need you. It's our reputation. He would plant seeds of poison. This friend of yours. She seems jealous of your talent. I don't trust her. That professor. He's a distraction. He doesn't understand the sacrifice this takes. He's small time. He'll drag you down. He framed his control as protection. I'm the only one who really understands what you're capable of. Eleanor, it's me and you against the world. My relationship ended. My friendships faded. Soon, the only person I spoke to was Marcus. The only world I knew was the workshop. He had isolated me completely, making me 100% dependent on him for money, for work, and for human contact. It wasn't a side effect of hard work. It was a strategy. It was to ensure that when he finally decided to push me out, I would have no one to call, no one to turn to. I would be a ghost, and no one would even know I was missing. He was right. I looked at my phone. I had no one to call. He had taken my money, my health, my name, my mind, and my entire life. And tonight, at the party, he had taken the last thing I had left, my dignity. He called me the glue mixer. He had always said, "I'm the brand. Eleanor, you're the talent, but the talent is worthless without the brand." He'd said it so many times. I believed him. I believed that my hands, my skill, my genius, was just dead wood, as he called it. He was the one who gave it story. He was the one who made it sexy. I looked at the cheap polo shirt I was still wearing. I ripped the catering apron off and threw it in the corner. His story was my story. He'd stolen my grandfather's legacy. His brand was my lung damage. His image was my scarred hands. He was nothing. He was a parasite. A hollow, beautiful, charming parasite that had attached itself to me and drained me for 7 years. I walked over to the old metal desk in the corner. I sat down at my work computer. Marcus was a visionary. He hated the boring side of the business. He was too big picture to deal with details. So he had made me do it all. I didn't just mix the glue. I did the accounting. I did the ordering. I did the logistics. And I did the IT. I had set up the entire company server. I built the firewall. I managed the cloud storage. I held every single master administrator password. He had given me every key to his entire kingdom, because he was too arrogant and too lazy to learn how the locks worked. He thought he was the visionary. He thought I was the assistant. He had no idea that the charity case and the catering apron was the only thing holding his entire, glittering, fraudulent world together. I typed in the master admin password, a password he didn't even know existed. I was in. He was at a party, drinking champagne, accepting praise for my life's work. A had made a critical, fatal mistake. He hadn't just humiliated me, he had given me a reason to fight back. And he had left me, all alone, with the keys. I didn't sleep. The hum of the dryers below my floor was a constant vibration. A mechanical heartbeat. I said mi disk. The glow of the monitor lighting my face. I had access to everything. The boring side of the business, as he called it, the cloud server, the financial software, the internal emails. He had trusted me with all of it, not out of faith, but out of sheer, arrogant laziness. He couldn't be bothered. I started with the financials. He kept 2 sets of books. One was the official one, the one he showed me. It was a masterpiece of creative accounting, showing us barely breaking even. Every sale was eaten by marketing expenses, client development, material costs, and consulting fees. Then I found the real one, the one linked to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, a shell corporation he'd set up in his name alone. The numbers were staggering. Vance Atelier wasn't just getting by. We were a rocket ship. The real profit margin wasn't 10%, it was over 70%. The materials I was so careful to save, the scraps I'd hoard. He was billing clients triple what we actually paid. I saw the wire transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Siphoned from the business account I saw. Into the shell corporation I didn't. Marketing expenses was just. Then him. Consulting fees was him. He wasn't reinvesting in the brand. He was systematically gutting it. I found an invoice from last winter. I remembered that month. The heating in my workshop was broken. I had worked in 40-degree temperatures. My fingers so cold I could barely grip the tools. I'd begged him to fix it. I just can't. Not right now, he'd said. His face a mask of pained regret. The margins on the hotel job were thinner than we thought. We just don't have the cash flow. Can you buy a space heater? I'll expense it. He never expensed it. I'd bought one with my own money. That same week, the same day I had begged him for heat, I saw a wire transfer from the Shell Corporation. $90,000. The line item, down payment, vintage Porsche. He had left me to freeze. Me fingers numb. My lungs aching from the cold air. So he could buy a classic car. My sacrifice wasn't a shared struggle. It was his budget. My suffering was the line item that allowed for his luxury. The colder my workshop, the faster his car, the less I ate, the more expensive his suits. It was a direct, one-to-one transfer of my life force to his. I kept digging. The theft was bad. The gaslighting was worse. But the final betrayal was in a folder I'd never seen before, marked Project Legacy. It was the acquisition paperwork. He was selling Vance Atelier. He was selling my work, my designs, my resin formula, my name. The deal was set to close in 3 days. The buyers were the consortium of investors from the party last night. The sale price made me stop breathing. $42 million. My share of our 50-50 partnership was $42 million. I scrolled through the documents, my blood turning to ice. I saw the list of assets, the patents for my resin, which he had filed in his name alone, the trademarks for the furniture designs, my designs, the brand name, and then I saw the employee roster. There were only 2 names, Marcus Vance, founder and CEO, and Eleanor Vance, assistant artisan. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was erasing my legal existence. He was selling my entire life's work. And I was being sold with it, like a piece of used equipment. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Marcus. Showroom. 10 We need to talk. I arrived at 10 on the dot. He was sitting at the monolith table, the centerpiece I had bled for. He was drinking an espresso, wearing a crisp new suit. He looked victorious. Eleanor. Good, he said, not standing up. Sit. I sat across from him. The polished resin surface, my genius, reflected his smug face. So, big things are happening, he said, leaning back. As you know, the brand is evolving, and that means we're going to be making some changes. He slid a document across the table. It was thick, bound in a legal blue cover. The new investors are restructuring, he said, steepling his smooth, soft fingers. And they just don't see a role for an assistant artisan in the new corporate structure. They're bringing in their own people. I opened the cover. The first page was a termination agreement. I fought for you, Elle, he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. I really did. I told them how diligent you are, how good you are at, mixing the glue. He smiled, the same smile from the party. But their minds were made up. Business is business. You know, I said nothing. I just read. He was firing me. Effective immediately. But the termination wasn't the real weapon. The second document was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement so ironclad it would vaporize my life. It stated that I, Eleanor Vance, was an employee at will, that all work, designs, formulas, and techniques created during my employment were the sole and exclusive property of Vance Atelier. It stated I would never, in perpetuity, claim any ownership or authorship of any design, that I would never associate myself with the brand, that I would never speak about my process to anyone. It legally and permanently defined me as the glue mixer. It was a gag order, signed and sealed, that erased my past and my future. Now, I know this is a shock, he continued, but the new owners, and we want to do right by you. We value your loyalty. He pointed to the last page. There's a severance. $10,000. $10,000. From a $42 million sale, he was offering me 0.02% of the company I had built from scratch. He was offering me $10,000 to disappear. It's a very generous offer. Eleanor, he said, his voice hardening slightly, sensing my silence. $10,000. Just to sign some papers. A clean break. A fresh start for you. I thought of my scarred hands. I thought of my damaged lungs. I thought of my stolen inheritance. I thought of the $90,000 Porsche he'd bought while I was freezing. He wasn't just firing me. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was buying my entire identity for the price of a used car. This is a good thing for you. Elle, he said, standing up, looming over me. This high-end world. It was never really you. You're free now. You can go find some small-time job. Something. Quieter. More suited to your, temperament. He was discarding me. Like a used tool. Like a piece of scaffolding. Now that the building was complete, I looked at him. His eyes were cold. There was no family in them. No shared history. Just a predator who had finished his meal. I picked up the pen. I need to read this first, I said, my voice perfectly level. He laughed. Of course. Take it home. Read all the fine print. Just have it back on my desk by tomorrow. The deal closes in 2 days. And this needs to be tidied up. Don't make this difficult. Eleanor. I stood up. I took the packet of papers. I understand. He smiled. Relieved. He had mistaken my calm for defeat. He thought I was beaten. He thought I was the same weak, dowdy, quiet girl who would just sign it and disappear. Good. I knew you'd be reasonable, he said, patting my shoulder. You were always a good assistant. I walked out of the showroom. I didn't go back to my apartment. I went back to the old garage. The first workshop we'd ever had. He'd kept it for storage, meaning it was full of his old junk and my old Kaim Aresida. Broken tools. He'd given me 24 hours to clear out my personal items from the workshop at my apartment. I went to my old desk, the one I'd built from scrap wood. I started packing my notebooks, my sketches, my chemical manuals. And then I saw it. Under the desk, covered in a thick layer of sawdust, was an old server tower. It was a backup drive. I had completely forgotten about it. Marcus had bought it 5 years ago. In a fit of vanity. He'd been obsessed with filming his process for a promo video. He'd bought a high-definition, motion-activated camera and mounted it directly above the main workbench, the bench where I worked 18 hours a day. He had wanted to film himself working, to get footage of him looking like a visionary. The problem was, he never worked. He'd come in, pose with a tool for a few minutes, get bored, and leave. He was too lazy to ever go through the footage. He'd complained that it was too much, that it was boring. He'd unplugged the drive and forgotten about it. But the camera was still plugged in. It was still linked to the drive. It had been motion activated. It had been recording me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wiped the dust off the drive and plugged it in. It wasn't just a few files. It was 7 years. 7 years of time-lapse footage. I clicked on a file from 2021, the week I'd cut my hand. I watched the time-lapse my hands, moving like a blur, day and night. I saw myself stop, saw myself wrap my hand in duct tape, and saw myself keep working. I clicked on another file. The resin experiments. I saw myself, night after night, in my respirator, mixing chemicals, pouring, all failing, pouring, all failing, and then, finally, succeeding. I clicked on a file from last week. I saw myself, staggering with exhaustion, putting the final polish on the monolith table, collapsing at 3 a.m. It was all there, every piece, every design, every breakthrough, every second of my suffering, and every moment of my triumph. It was 7 years of undeniable, visual proof. Proof that he was a liar. Proof that I was the artist. Marcus's own vanity, his own laziness, had created the one piece of evidence that could destroy him. He had paid for the camera. He had set it up, and he had forgotten it. It was perfect. It was poetic justice. I copied the files onto a small, encrypted USB drive. He thought he had just bought my silence for $10,000. He thought he was erasing me. He had no idea that I was holding a bomb. He had no idea that the glue mixer was about to burn his entire $42 million empire to the ground. The next morning, I had 1 hour of sleep. The vibrating hum of the dryers below had been the soundtrack to my work. My eyes were burning, raw from staring at the screen. I hadn't just watched the footage. I had edited it. I sat in a public tech rental office, a place with high-speed computers that I paid for in cash. I had spent 7 hours painstakingly compiling 7 years of my life. I relived every moment. I watched myself, in time-lapse, working in the 40-degree workshop, my breath fogging in the air. I watched myself collapse on the floor at 3 a.m. after finishing the monolith table. I watched myself, my hand wrapped in duct tape, sanding, sanding, sanding. Then, I spliced in his footage. I created a brutal, undeniable comparison. On the left side of the screen, my hands, blurred with motion, working for 30 hours straight. On the right side of the screen, Marcus, from that same week, strolling into the workshop, posing with a chisel for 5 minutes, checking his phone, and leaving. I showed my resin experiments, the failures, the fumes, the small fires. Then I showed him, 3 days later, holding up my successful sample to a client, saying, "It's a little something I've been developing." I edited it all down to a single, devastating, 15-minute file. I didn't add music. I didn't add text. I just added a simple daughter, running time and date stamp in the corner of the screen. I titled the file, Vance Atelier, The Process. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Marcus. He sounded impatient, annoyed. "Eleanor, it's 9. The meeting is at 11. I don't have the papers. Are you making this difficult?" I kept my voice perfectly flat, perfectly tired. "No, Marcus, I'm not. I've reviewed the agreement." He sighed, a sound of profound relief. "Good God. You had me worried. Just drop it by with a messenger. I'll see you get your check." "No," I said. "I'll bring it myself." There was a pause. "Why?" "I'd like to be there," I said, letting my voice sound small, pathetic. I just want to see it. See the end." I could hear his ego inflate over the phone. He chuckled. "Pathetic. A little pathetic. But fine. Whatever. The signing is at Hamilton, Price, and Stern, 50th floor. Do not make a scene. Use the service entrance. Tell the receptionist you're delivering papers. And do not be late." He hung up. He thought I was coming to watch his triumph, like a sad ghost. He thought I was coming to hand him my signed surrender. He had agreed. He had set his own execution. I arrived at 10:45. The law office was a universe of glass and steel, overlooking the city. I was wearing a simple, cheap black dress I'd bought at a thrift store. I looked, as he'd intended, like the help. The receptionist looked at me with open disdain. "Service deliveries are around the back." "I'm here for the Vance Atelier signing," I said. "Name, Eleanor Vance. I'm delivering the papers." Her eyes scanned a list. "You're not on the list." "Mr. Vance is expecting me," I said. She huffed, then picked up the phone. "Mr. Vance, there's an Eleanor Vance is here. She says she has papers." She listened. "Yes. See ya. I'll send her back." She pointed. "Main conference room. Down the hall." I walked down the hall. I saw him through the glass wall. He was the center of the universe. The investors were there, laughing. The lawyers, in their $1,000 suits, were arranging stacks of documents. And the journalist from Artisan Today was there. She was sitting in the corner, a notepad in her lap, there to document the historic acquisition. I opened the door and slipped in. The room was buzzing with excited chatter. I stood by the wall, invisible. I was holding a large manila envelope. Marcus saw me. He strode over, his face a mask of triumph, his eyes sharp with warning. "Eleanor, good. You're here," he whispered, his voice a low hiss. "Give me the papers." He reached for the envelope. I held it tight. "I'll hold them," I said quietly, "until it's done." He glared, annoyed. He was about to snap at me. But one of the investors called his name. "Marcus, come on. Let's get this done." He couldn't make a scene. "Not now." "Fine." He spat. "Whatever. Just stay against the wall, and do not speak." He walked back to the head of the table. He was glowing. Javier, the senior partner, stood up. "Gentlemen and lady," he said, nodding to the journalist. "This is a momentous day. We are here to finalize the acquisition of Vance Atelier by the Legacy Investment Group for the sum of $42 million. There was a polite smattering of applause. "Before we sign the final papers," the lead investor said, "I'd like to invite Mr. Vance to say a few words. Marcus, this is your day. You've built an incredible brand." Marcus stood. He adjusted his perfect cuffs. He beamed at the room. "Thank you, Robert," he said, his voice booming with false humility. This is the culmination of a dream I had in a small, cold garage, 7 years ago. I watched him. He was using my story. People see the finished product," he continued. "They see the shine, they see the beauty, but they don't see the journey. They don't see the sacrifice. They don't see the blood and the sweat." He was looking right at me, a tiny, pitying smirk on his face. "They don't see the 18-hour days. They don't see the hands." He held up his hands, his smooth, soft, manicured hands. The hands that took that raw vision and shaped it into reality. The journalist was scribbling every word. "It wasn't easy. I sacrificed. I gave everything. But I knew, in my heart, that my vision was right. I knew my process was right. And today is the proof. Today, my vision is finally, fully, realized. Thank you." The room erupted in applause. The investors were on their feet. "Bravo. Marcus, bravo." He sat down, basking in the glow. The lawyer pushed the final signature page in front of him. "Well, Marcus, let's make it official." Marcus picked up the heavy, expensive pen. He looked at the journalist and smiled. He uncapped it. He was hovering over the paper, the pen just an inch from his name. I stood up. My voice was not a shout. It was clear, calm, and cut through the applause like a shard of glass. "You forgot to show them your process, Marcus." Every head in the room swiveled. The applause died instantly. Marcus froze. The pen stopped. He looked at me, his face turning from triumph to confusion, then to pure, cold fury. "Eleanor," he hissed, "sit down." "But you were always so proud of your process," I said, walking forward from the wall. I dropped the manila envelope on the floor. The unsigned NDA and termination agreement spilled out. I wasn't holding those. I was holding a small, black, encrypted USB drive. "What is this?" the lead investor, Robert, asked, his voice sharp. "Marcus and we've been partners for 7 years," I said. He wanted to show his vision, his journey, but he forgot the best part. I walked to the head of the table, to the massive, 80-inch television screen they'd been using for the presentation. I unplugged the lawyer's laptop. "Eleanor, don't," Marcus snarled, starting to rise from his chair. "What's on the drive?" Marcus, I asked, pushing the USB into the port. "Is it your vision? Is it your sacrifice?" The screen flickered. The investors were all on their feet. The journalist was standing, her phone out. Recording. Security, Marcus yelled. Get her out of here. She's hysterical. I am not hysterical, I said. As the file clicked open, I'm the glue mixer. I'm the family charity. I'm the assistant artisan you're firing with $10,000. I looked at Robert, and I am the sole creator of every single piece you are about to pay $42 million for. I hit play. The screen went black for 1 second. Then, it lit up. There was no sound. Just the relentless, silent, time-stamped footage on the left side of the screen. My hands, stained and blurred, working. On the right, Marcus, strolling in, posing with a chisel, checking his phone, and leaving. The room was utterly, completely silent. The only sound was the clicking of the lawyer's pen, which he had just dropped on the table. Turn it off, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. Turn it off now. This is proprietary data. It's stolen. The lead investor, Robert, didn't even look at him. His eyes were glued to the screen. He held up one hand. Shut up. Marcus. The power in the room shifted so fast it was like a physical blow. Those were his 18-hour days. I said, my voice calm, projecting to every corner of the room. These. I pointed to my side of the screen. Were mine. He called it artistic discovery. I called it Tuesday. The footage changed. It was the week I'd cut my hand. The time-lapse showed me working for 30 hours straight. It showed the moment I staggered. The moment I looked down. It showed me wrapping my hand in duct tape and paper towels. It showed me continuing to sand. For another 12 hours. My wrapped hand turning dark. Me God, the journalist whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. This was the blood and sweat he sacrificed. I narrated, my voice unwavering, my blood, my sweat. He was in Milan that week, scouting trends. He told me, over the phone, to use superglue to close the wound so I wouldn't miss the deadline. One of the lawyers actually flinched. He looked at Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Eleanor, Marcus pleaded, his voice high and thin. He was no longer the visionary. He was a child, caught in a lie. The video changed again. It was the resin. 18 months of my life. Compressed into 3 minutes. They saw me in my respirator, surrounded by chemicals. They saw the small fire, the one I'd put out myself. They saw the hundreds of failed, ugly blocks of resin. They saw me, alone at 4 a.m., holding up the first perfect, light-refracting sample, looking exhausted and triumphant. Then, the split-screen me, collapsing on the floor in my workshop, and him, that same day, holding my sample up for the investors at his condo. His voice picked up by the camera's microphone, smooth and confident. It's a little something I've been developing. A real game changer. The lie was so perfect, so complete, so undeniable, that the air left the room. And that, I said, pointing to the manila envelope on the floor, 'tis the $10,000 termination agreement and gag order he gave me this morning. To erase me, to buy my silence, so he could sell my work, my formulas, and my name to you, for $42 million. The journalist, the one he had charmed, lowered her phone. Her face was pale with fury. You told me she was family charity. You told me she mixed the glue. She looked at him, and her professional neutrality was gone. You're a fraud. You're a complete and total fraud. This was it. The collapse. Marcus's face, which had been pale, turned a deep, blotchy purple. He slammed his soft, manicured fist on the table. You! He shrieked, pointing at me. You're destroying me. After everything I did for you, I made you. You were nothing. You were a girl in a garage with a hobby. I gave you a brand. I gave you a name. This is family. Eleanor, You don't do this to family. I looked at him, the man who had stolen my inheritance, my health, and my life, the man who had left me to freeze. No, Marcus, I said, my voice quiet, but it carried. I was the artist in the garage. You were just the man who stole the keys. You're not family. You're a parasite. And you're done. Robert Marcus turned, his eyes wide and desperate, to the lead investor. Robert, don't listen to her. She's hysterical. She's a bitter, fired employee. We can fix this. We can sue her. Robert stood up. He was a tall man, immaculate. He walked to the 80-inch screen and hit the stop button. The video vanished, plunging the room back into a heavy, terrible silence. He turned, not to me, but to Marcus. His voice was not angry. It was cold. It was the voice of a man calculating massive financial loss. And it was terrifying. Mr. Vance, Robert said. The acquisition of Vance Atelier is cancelled. Effective immediately. Our offer is withdrawn. No. Robert. You can't. Marcus was sobbing now. Actual tears of panic streaming down his face. It's a misunderstanding. She's lying, we can. I'll cut her in 50,000. She'll take it. Mr. Hamilton, Robert said to the senior lawyer. Our legal team will be in touch by noon regarding a lawsuit for fraudulent misrepresentation. We have a room full of witnesses. He nodded to the journalist, who was recording again. And a confession. Please. Marcus whimpered. He had fully regressed. He was a terrified, begging child. Please. Don't do this. It's my whole life. Robert ignored him. He turned to me. His entire demeanor changed. The coldness vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating interest. He was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. Miss Vance, he said, I apologize. It appears we have been negotiating with the wrong person for 6 months. He looked me up and down, at my cheap black dress and my scarred artist's hands. I have a new proposal, he said. My group will fund you, 100%. We will set up a new corporation. Your name, your terms. We'll handle the business. You just do that. He gestured to the dark screen. $50 million. Is that a start? I looked at Marcus. He was completely broken. His face was a white, tear-streaked mask of ruin. He was staring at me, his mouth open, making no sound. He was hollow. I turned back to Robert. I'll need to see the paperwork, I said. My lawyer will be in touch. The journalist let out a small, sharp laugh of triumph. Right on cue. The conference room doors burst open. 2 uniformed security guards rushed in, looking flustered. Sir, you called for security, Mr. Vance. Robert didn't miss a beat. He pointed. Not at me, but at Marcus. Yes, Robert said. Please escort this man out of the building. He's trespassing. Marcus didn't even fight. He was numb. The guards, confused, but following the order from the man who owned the building, took his arms. Eleanor, he whispered, as they dragged him past me. Eleanor, please. I just watched him go. I watched them pull my 7-year parasite out of the room, out of the life he had stolen. The door clicked shut. I calmly walked to the television, retrieved my USB drive, and slipped it into my pocket. I turned to Robert, who was now smiling, his hand outstretched. Ellis Artisan, he said. I like the sound of that. Shall we begin? I shook his hand. We shall. My journey hadn't ended. It had just begun. But this time, I wasn't the glue mixer. I was the founder. I had taken the only thing he'd ever given me, his name, and I had made it my own. On my terms. I had learned that true strength isn't about the story someone tells about you. It's about the work of your own hands. And my hands, scarred and ruined as they were, had just built my entire future. Subscribe for more shocking, real-life inspired stories. Like, share and subscribe for more dramatic, twist-filled short stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update.